I am so honored to join you here this morning representing the 3 million members of the largest labor union in this country, the National Education Association. And the crowd goes wild, wilder. On this, your 48th, is that right? Yeah, International Convention. Congratulations. I must always take a few minutes to recognize your visionary and courageous leaders. My dear friend, Mr. Terry Melvin, our president, as well as, he would be the first to say, he doesn't do this alone, his beautiful wife, and his executive committee. And I, too, want to honor Mr. Bill Lucy, who has set the path for so many of us. They are all working together to seize on this moment to build on a really long tradition of being the voice for Black workers within the trade union movement, challenging organized labor to be more relevant to the needs and aspirations of Black and poor workers. Understanding that 1 out of every 5 Black workers is a union member, CBTU has leveraged the vast resources of unions to mobilize Black voters, to influence elections and not stop there, to influence public policy at every level of government. When I look out at you, I see brave and unbroken Black trade unionists that stretch all the way back to A. Philip Randolph, who declared, and I love this, "We are the advance guard of a massive moral revolution." Is that us? Yes, it is. And Frederick Douglass, who most people don't know, was not only an abolitionist, but he was also a labor union leader, serving as vice president and then president of the Colored National Labor Union. Most people do know, however, his clear and bold reminder that is steeped in unionism. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. So our proud lineage is rooted in icons who have paved the way for us to stand up and fight for what's right. So this has been an incredible year for us across this nation as we've seen educators rise up on behalf of their students and their schools. Red for Ed became the rallying cry, not just of our educators and students, but of Americans throughout the nation whose collective conscience was shocked by teachers selling their blood to feed their families, students trying to learn without textbooks, schools struggling to do their best without heat and desks or computers. So we didn't rise up alone. Those who believe that public education is that great equalizer, that engine of opportunity in a democratic society, they rose up with us. In a sea of red, parents and students, churches, community organizations, and labor leaders like you joined educators because they too believe in the right of all students to have the education they deserve. Those moments last spring have ignited a movement that continues to sweep this country. Educators in more and more states are realizing that their collective voices make them powerful beyond measure. UTLA was on strike for 6 days until their board agreed to hire more counselors and nurses and hold accountable the corporate charter school industry who are making money off of the backs of our babies. And they didn't stop there. They went on strike because they knew they had to bring about more community schools that would surround their students with supports and resources, rich and challenging curriculum that is actually inspiring families to move back into our urban schools, where students can learn and grow together in diverse environments. Denver stayed on strike until they got changes to their punitive compensation system that was driving teachers from the classroom. And Oakland walked the picket lines until they won lower class sizes for their students and salaries that would help their members take care of their families. Marches in North and South Carolina and Maryland and Oregon, tens of thousands of educators and their allies standing up for their students and their schools. Yes. And then little West Virginia, where it all started, they went back to the streets too. Their legislators apparently needed a reminder of their strength and their resolve. Our valiant educators and their allies demonstrated again the power of collective action. This time they used their power to beat back efforts to privatize and voucherize their public schools. Even as those cunning legislators tried to buy them off with offers of increased salaries, educators stood strong. They knew and they embraced the full meaning behind these words. Of all the civil rights for which this world has fought and died for 5,000 years, the right to learn is undoubtedly the most fundamental. The freedom to learn has been bought by bitter sacrifice. So whatever you might think about the curtailment of other civil rights, you must fight to the last ditch to keep open the right to learn. Those powerful words by W.E.B. Du Bois speak to the magnitude of the responsibility entrusted not only to educators, but to parents, to our entire community, to you. We need you to stand in the gap for our children when Betsy DeVos refuses to protect their basic civil rights, instead choosing to promote what I've heard perfectly described, listen to this, as emboldened edu-vultures, peddling privatization, seeking to starve our schools so they can pick at the bones of a decimated system. We need you to stand in the gap when inequitable resources diminish our students' opportunities, when their families are torn apart, when bullies challenge their ability to learn. We need you to join us in demanding that every public school looks like the best public school. And when they tell you they can't afford it, we need you to call them out. They did afford it. They afforded it for some of those children, but not for all. And we know what those children look like. There's just no excuse why some of our children in America don't have what they need so they can learn, why they don't have the security of knowing their basic civil rights are protected so they can live, why they don't have a support system that sees their humanity so they can thrive. 65 years ago, the Supreme Court handed down its historic decision in Brown versus the Board of Education, a decision that promised equitable education through the dismantling of segregated schools. But here we are. Here we are. Schools are more segregated, and far too many students are struggling with the inequities within and across systems that threaten their opportunity to experience the quality of education that we want for all of our children. We must stand in unbroken solidarity and fight like our children's lives depend on it. We must raise our voices until every educator is honored as the professional they are and compensated for the invaluable work they do. We must build powerful coalitions among our labor partners and across our communities that will hold those responsible for the damage that decades of disinvestment has done to our students and our communities. Former National Teacher of the Year, Kim Oliver, posed this profound question: are you worthy of your students? Are you worthy of your students? Kim understood in asking us that question as educators that we had a profound responsibility for those young lives we had in our hands. We cannot answer Kim's question, yes, as long as fear and inequity and injustice exists in this society. We cannot answer Kim's question, yes, as long as one child feels they are not valued or respected for who they are. We can find strength in the movements of the past. But CBTU, we must understand it is our turn now to take up that struggle for the beloved community. We must demonstrate our understanding that elections matter. They matter. We know our current reality cannot stand, and those of us who have chosen intentionally to step up and become leaders cannot allow it. So not only must we be bold, we must be unapologetic, we must be fierce and determined, we must be race explicit in calling out those who are harming our children. We must be resolute in shining a light on the sexist language and actions that perpetuate misogyny. We must bravely stand up for our LGBTQ students who are suffering because their rights have been eroded. This moment compels us to act. So we will not be silent. We will march and we will rally and we will vote until we shift that equity paradigm so our students get what they need when they need it. As he recalled his experience making the decision to put his Black body on the line that day in Selma, Georgia's own Congressman Lewis said he knew in the moment that he had to get in the way of the Jim Crow laws that for far too long had gotten in the way of justice. Fellow labor leaders, we must get in the way of the legal and legislative actions that threaten to diminish our right as unions to engage in collective action. We must get in the way of that march toward unfettered power and inequality. We must get in the way of the structural inequalities that purposely are designed to privilege some and disadvantage others, because the moral arc of the universe doesn't bend on its own. We have to bend it. That must be us. Now, I know, Brother Terry, I've asked a lot of you this morning, so I'm going to leave you with 3 words. keep plugging away. That's right. Those are the words I had to learn from a poem I had to recite when I was a young girl growing up in North Philly. Yeah, oh. Aye. I went to a small Black Baptist church, and it was the tradition of the church that the children would say pieces, Easter pieces, Christmas pieces, Mother's Day pieces. Can I get a witness? I had a large family. My father had 8 sisters. Every one of my aunts thought they were my mother. That's right. When they came into the house, they would say, Becky Sue, get up on the landing and say your piece. Well, by the time the day came for me to say my piece, I was sick of it. When they called me to the front of the church, much to the congregation's surprise and my family's horror, my knees began to buckle, and I bolted from the church. Well, my father came out after me. Now, I should tell you, he's from the spare the rod, spoil the child generation. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So when I looked behind me, I was more than a little bit afraid. But noticing my obvious dejection, my dad put his arms around me, and he said, Rebecca. That's what he called me, Cleola, when he was really mad or very serious. He said, Rebecca, look up at the sky. The sun is still shining, and it will rise again tomorrow. With those encouraging words, I went back into the church and I said my piece. The beginning words of which I remember to this day. When rising storms to quell, when opposing waters swell, keep a plugging away. If the hills are high before and the paths are hard to climb, keep a plugging away. So CBTU, those are the words I leave you with this morning. When all of society's ills and precious few of its resources are laid at the doors of our schools and our communities, I need you to keep plugging away. When you witness elections that are being stolen by racist laws and rigged systems, I need you to keep plugging away. When the erosion of our democratic principles threaten the progress we've made, I need you to keep plugging away with our moral compass pointed toward justice and equity with courage and eternal vigilance. We will get in the way in every community, in every state, all across this nation, and we will reclaim the soul of America, because our babies are depending on us to be worthy of them. Thank you so very much for all you do for our children and for our communities and for this country. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Check TV.